Welcome back, everybody. In this video, I'm going to show you my method for learning from every single chess game you play. It's very simple, not very complicated. It's something that anyone can do. So I'm going to explain the method, and then I'm also going to show you a full game. I'll analyze the game and show you that method in action. Let's jump into it. The first step to this method is pretty simple. You got to play a game. But you don't just want to play any game. If you want to improve, you really should be playing longer time controls. So classical if you can. If not, at least be playing rapid chess online. That's the first step. The second step of this method, and this step is the most important, is that you have to start playing players who are just a little bit stronger than you, maybe up to about 200 points above you. You're going to learn a lot from these games because these players are going to exploit weaknesses in your game that you didn't know existed, but that you can also understand pretty easily. If you're playing someone who's a grandmaster, they're going to exploit weaknesses in your position that you didn't know existed and that you still probably can't understand after the game. Some of these things are just going to be worlds beyond what we can understand. So find players who are just a little bit stronger than you, and you can do this really easily online. If you're on chess.com, it's very easy to do this. Just before you click on a new game, go to custom and change the rating range. Set the minimum to, let's say, -25 and the maximum to +200. So the vast majority of times you're playing players who are stronger than you. The final step of this method, play a normal game. Don't have to do anything special there. But the third and final step is just to notice when your position starts to worsen. You're going to feel it. If you lose a piece or you get checkmated, you'll obviously feel it. But even otherwise, even just positionally, maybe you feel constrained, your pieces aren't as active as you want them to be, or you're just not able to execute the plans that you thought you were able to. Notice when those moments happen, maybe even jot them down because those are going to be key for how we actually learn. We're going to analyze those moments at the end of the game so that we can see what our opponent understood earlier on than we did. Now let's jump into my example game. Here, I put my method to the test. So this is a rapid game. I'm 1864. My opponent was 2063. So almost exactly 200 points above me. And I'll show you the exact moments where I felt like my position was worse, where I felt like my position was worsening. And I'll also show you exactly how I learned from it. So my opponent had the white pieces. He played d4. I went d5. And my opponent played knight c3. This is kind of an offbeat opening for d4 players. It's not something that you see very frequently. But I just decided to play normally, so I went knight f6. Here my opponent played e3, and now I go c5, striking back in the center. White continues to develop here, knight f3, and now I go knight c6. Totally normal so far. We feel good, no issues. My opponent plays bishop e2, I go e6, white castles, and now I play bishop e7. Very solid. I think black is probably even equalized. We're feeling good. No issues so far. Here, white played knight a4. This was a pretty strange move. Did not expect it at all. And I thought it was very strange because here I can just play c4 and then go b5, kick the knight away with tempo. So this seemed good to me. So I went with c4. My opponent played b3, attacking this pawn chain. So now I play b5, and the knight moves to c5. Before I played b5, I saw that the knight could come to c5, but I thought that if I capture this knight and the pawn takes back, this pawn on c5 would be too weak. I thought I was going to win it. So I thought knight c5 was not possible, and it turns out I was very wrong, and you'll see exactly why. I continued with my plan here. I captured this knight, and I thought after the recapture that this pawn on c5 would be too weak. We'd be able to win it very soon. So next I castled, and I thought we'll play queen e7 on the next move. We'll attack the c5 pawn, and white doesn't have a good way to defend it, right? White cannot play b4 because we would capture that. And similarly, after queen e7, white can't play bishop a3 because we have b4, which kicks the bishop away. Then we can win this pawn. But the move that I missed was really nice. It was knight d4. So this knight attacks our b5 pawn, but it also attacks our knight. We have no way to defend both. So our best move here, and the move that I played, is actually just to capture this knight. And this is a shame because the only reason we captured this knight on c5 with our bishop, which generally isn't an advisable trade, is that I thought that this pawn would be weak in the end. I thought we'd be able to win it. But after white recaptures with the queen here, probably would have been better to capture with the pawn to really solidify it. But even after recapturing with the queen, we can see that this pawn on c5 is not as much of a weakness as we thought it was. It cramps our position a little bit, and it's actually pretty well defended right now. So this was a great learning moment for me. Then the second moment where I started to feel my position worsen came immediately afterwards, actually. So here I played queen c7 because I wanted to attack this pawn on c5, and also queen c7 develops the queen a little bit, and additionally gives us the added benefit of potentially playing e5. Seemed like there were a lot of good moves here. But now after bishop b2, we see that we can't actually play e5 because I played rook e8, and now white goes f4, completely blocking up this e5 push. So in hindsight, after seeing this, I realized that I should have played rook e8 first. Rook e8 first. Now if white goes bishop b2, we can still play e5, and we can at least have good control of the center that kicks the queen away and leaves the c5 pawn a little bit weaker. So this was the second learning moment for me. After my opponent played f4, I made a mental note because I knew that I was not getting out of the position what I wanted from it. So I knew this was going to be a moment to learn from. After the game ended, I analyzed it, and that's how I realized that queen c7 was not right. I should have played rook e8 first. In this position, now I played queen e7 because unfortunately our opponent also has a battery against us. So if this knight on f6 moves, we're going to get checkmated. And the problem here is that white has the idea of playing g4 and then g5, which is going to kick the knight away, which leads to checkmate, or we're just going to have to sacrifice the knight. So I brought the queen over to e7 so I could tuck it away on f8 and then move the knight safely. Now my opponent played g4. I went queen f8 to defend this g7 pawn so that if white finally does play g5, we can move the knight away safely and not be worried about checkmate on g7 because we have two pieces defending. Now my opponent played rook a to c1, just activating the rook a little bit, and I played knight e4, centralizing the knight. My opponent went c6, a bit of a strange move, but I was obviously attacking the c5 pawn, so he wanted to get it to safety, and I don't actually have a very easy way to attack this pawn. And also my bishop on c8 is kind of very difficult to develop here because it doesn't have many squares. So now I played f5. I thought we can just solidify this knight here and just really, really lock down this e4 square. My opponent played bishop f3, attacking the knight, and now I go for a5, trying to get a little bit of space on the queen side. I didn't want to develop the bishop to a6 before pushing the pawn because we want to use that pawn to try to actually create some space there on the queen side. Now white captured on c4, I recaptured with the pawn, and after the trade on f5 as well, my opponent played king h1. This is a really nice move because it opens up the g file for the rook, so eventually he'll be able to play rook g1, add even more pressure to this g7 pawn. And this was a threat that I had actually missed, so I played bishop e6 here, and white played a really nice combination. First, he took the knight on e4. We don't want to capture with the f-pawn because then he's going to play f5, grab even more space, and rip open lines on the king side. So I captured with the d-pawn. Now my opponent played rook g1, adding more pressure to this g7 pawn, and the only thing I can do here is play rook e7. Now my opponent goes bishop a3, and he wins the rook. Now the reason I played bishop e6 in the first place is that I wanted to develop the bishop, but I also thought I needed to defend this pawn on d5. I thought I kind of got lucky with my opponent playing king h1 instead of taking this pawn, but this actually wasn't a threat at all. If white had captured here, we would have played bishop e6, which attacks the queen. After the queen moves, we can bring the other rook over. The queen can escape. We can go to a7, but black gets very, very active. This would have been very good for us, actually. So this bishop a3 line that happened in the game was another moment where I felt my position worsen, partially because I was about to lose the exchange, and I analyzed this moment specifically at the end of the game so that I could pinpoint exactly where my weakness was, and I didn't realize that we had so many dark squared weaknesses. My opponent has this battery here, and once the rook comes to g1, there's just way too much pressure on the dark squares here. This is what I had missed specifically. So after bishop a3, here I played rook a to a7. We're losing the exchange either way. Doesn't really matter. So after the bishop captured, I took back with the queen, and now my opponent played rook b1, activating the rook and putting the rook on the open file here. Our position here is very uncomfortable. If we allow it, white is going to play rook b8 check. If the king moves, then queen takes g7 is going to be checkmate. We have no way to actually block this check on b8. We can't block with the bishop, and we don't want to have to block with the queen. So I played rook c7 here, so that after rook b8 check, I could play rook c8, and at least the rook is defended, and I can take back with the bishop. But the move that I missed was rook b7. I thought that I could play rook c7, but there's actually a really, really nice move that just comes out of nowhere here. So pause the video, try to find this move. And white's move here is fantastic. Here my opponent played rook takes g7 check. If our king moves, then white is going to capture the queen on the next move and likely checkmate us in just a couple moves. So after we take the rook, now white has the only winning move, which is queen d8 check. If our king moves to f7, the queen will capture the rook with check, and then take our queen on the next move and mate us in just a couple moves. And instead, after queen f8, the queen is going to capture on c7. In this position, I resigned. We have nothing to do here. White is up too much material already, and additionally, they have this pawn on c6, which they're going to promote in just a couple moves. My opponent crushed me in this game, but even so, I still stuck with my method. At the end of the game, I analyzed the entire game, but focused on those moments where I felt my position worsen, so I could understand what I did wrong, and I could understand what weaknesses in my game had existed so that I could learn from them and make sure that I don't make those same mistakes in the future. As a recap, for this method to work, all you have to do is play longer time control games, classic or at least rapid. These are going to be the time controls where you're playing as close to your best chess as possible. Ensure that you're playing higher rated opponents. If you're playing online, this is easy. You can just change the rating range. And then during the game, note down the moments mentally or on paper where you feel your position start to worsen at the end of the game. Make sure you analyze those specific moments because those are going to be things that are weaknesses in your game, but likely weaknesses that you can understand because your opponent is not worlds beyond you. They're just a little bit stronger. You can likely learn from these moments very well and make sure that you don't make these mistakes in the future. That is my method. I have to warn you, it's not for the faint of heart. You're going to lose a lot of games, but undoubtedly, the fastest way to improve is to learn by doing, learn from experience, and to learn from stronger players. So this method combines both of those. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing. And if you do end up trying out the method, let me know in the comments below how it ends up working out for you.